Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin Sinise.
And I'm Mike Poteet, and you're listening to episode 76, reviewing Star Trek Picard's latest episode, 2 of 1. We'll start off with some Star Trek trivia.
And then we'll find out who wins Star Trek trivia right after our main topic, exploring Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 6, 2 of 1. It's going to be a great conversation. Stay with us. Well, we are at it again, Mike.
Here we are. Yeah, like Trek just keeps coming.
Yes, we ourselves are two of one habit of getting together and talking about Star Trek.
I see what you did there. Nice.
That was as clever as it gets right now, folks.
These are the jokes.
These are the jokes.
We'll be here all week. Thank you.
Oh, we better not be here all week. I got stuff to do.
We'll try to be a little more efficient than that. Yes.
Right. Oh, man. My. Well, you've been doing all right this week?
I've been doing okay. You were telling me a little bit before we came on air that spring is happening down your way. And I wondered if you've been seeing lots of bluebonnets. I know that Texas is famous for bluebonnets. And I remember fondly going to see the bluebonnets as a kid growing up down there in the Lone Star State. And my grandmother would paint bluebonnets. And
nice.
How's the bluebonnet crop doing this year?
The only bluebonnets I have seen, because I don't get out much, the only bluebonnets I have seen are in a photo that a friend of mine sent me of the first ones that she saw this season. She was out for a walk and saw these bluebonnets and sent the picture to me. And so those are the first I've seen, but I do know that Ennis, Texas, which is a big bluebonnet, kind of our bluebonnet capital, I guess. You know, kind of, they're very famous for their bluebonnet fields. They are starting up, I think, this weekend. They're having their first big event, and they're running for the next month or so. So
there are bluebonnet festivals and so forth.
Well, yeah, and they have these fields. You can just go out on these fields, and people take pictures. We got pictures of my son when he was like 4. Out there. We haven't been out there in a long time, obviously since he's 12. But we always talk about it, so maybe we'll go. It would be very nice. So it's cool.
You should take advantage of the bluebonnet festivals. Around here, the festivals that everybody likes to do are strawberry festivals. Like every church and social organization has its own strawberry festival where it's basically an excuse to go and eat strawberries and cake and ice cream. And sometimes there's like flea markets that go along with it. And our church, we have singing groups come in. We had a karate group come in once and do a demonstration.
Oh,
so
nice.
It's interesting, the springtime rituals that human civilization has developed.
Yes, they are very interesting. Yep. And I don't know if you could do strawberry themed karate, but hey,
well, you find a big enough strawberry, you could chop it in half with your bare hand.
Oh, there you go.
Or kick it in half with your foot.
There you go. You could do that.
Yeah. I would maybe pay good money to see that. How different could it be from like Gallagher smashing the watermelons with a mallet? You know?
Exactly. And, everybody knows we now have video games where people smash fruit. So, hey, it's just a thing.
Hey, yes.
I'd rather eat it, but that's just me.
Have you played Fruit Ninja?
I have.
Yeah, I like it. It's good. My kids got me into it for a while there when they were a little younger. And it can get pretty intense.
Yeah, my son did too. So... Interestingly, the things we come up with to occupy our time, like talking about Star Trek or doing Star Trek trivia.
Like Star Trek trivia, speaking of rituals. Yes, indeed.
Yes. Well, since it is about that ritual time, let's get our data entry devices ready.
Sounds so technical when you say it that way. Trivia questions. Here we go. Number 1. Where is B'Elanna Torres's destination in the Voyager episode Barge of the Dead?
Oh, okay.
Well, I think
we don't get counted off for spelling on this, do we?
No, I'm not going to count off for spelling.
Okay, good.
The people who wrote the game aren't here to count off for spelling. So
right.
All right, we're ready for number 2?
Ready.
In the motion picture Nemesis, How does Captain Picard realize Data's memories may live on in his brother B4?
Once again, the motion picture got me thinking.
Well,
the
and
wrong
because
movie.
it's so much on the mind these days.
So much on the mind, yes.
In the movie Star Trek Nemesis, how does Captain Picard realize Data's memories may live on in his brother B4? All right. Ready for number 3?
All right, ready.
Okay, third and final question for today. What recurring part from Star Trek Enterprise was played by Prada, Breezy, and Windy? W-I-N-D-Y.
What recurring part on... okay, got it.
Yeah, I think I've got that one too. But we shall see. We have been wrong before. We've both been confident and wrong before.
That's right.
It's no guarantee.
I need a shirt that says confident and wrong. That's good. I like that very much.
Well, once we get our merchandise store going, that'll be...
Yes.
Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Confident and wrong since 2017 or whatever.
2019, but yeah.
2019.
Or 2020. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay.
See? Confident yet wrong.
So, exactly. I'm so good at it.
Oh.
Well, I think I'm right in saying that it is time for us now to discuss Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 6, 2 of 1. The very latest in the adventures of apparently CIA operative Picard instead of Admiral Picard. How did you find this episode, sir?
Well, I enjoyed it. I was a little surprised when it came up shorter than the episodes have been. It's just shy of 40 minutes.
I thought it was short. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know why they did that, but I didn't mind it because it felt paced right to me.
Yeah.
I will say a big band arrangement of Pat Benatar was not on my season 2 bingo card. So that scene really surprised me.
Yep.
But I liked the idea that the Borg Queen is pushing Jurati to cut loose a little. Now, of course, the Queen's doing it for ulterior motives.
Right.
She wants that flood of endorphins that's going to give her the ability to totally take control of Jurati's body. So I think we're drifting farther and farther from the possibility you posited in episode 1 that we might end up friends with the Borg by the end of all this.
I still say, I didn't say we'd end up friends with the Borg exactly, but I do say that there's some sort of path for reconciliation perhaps, but I still also say the Borg Queen we are watching now is not the Borg Queen who showed up at the beginning of the season.
Well, I think you're probably right on that because they would have shown us her face in episode 1 if she were.
Exactly. So, yeah. So I don't think anything that we see with the Borg Queen right now has any real bearing on the Borg Queen we met at the beginning of the season. So
do you think when that Borg Queen's mask comes off by the end of the series, as surely it will be Agnes Jurati under there?
I have no idea. That's weird.
That is my current working hypothesis.
That is possible. Wow.
And unfortunately, my hypothesis is that she has been assimilated and that she is out to assimilate the Stargazer and the fleet and the galaxy as we know it. But,
interesting.
But we shall see. I mean, I'm so impressed by what these actors can do. Those scenes that they share just are consistently, week after week, riveting and amazing and disturbing and funny. And boy, I'm in awe. I mean, these are two actors at the top of their craft, and they play off each other so well, and they're given such good material, I think, to work with. I liked the turn this storyline took this week. What did you think about it?
I did too. I mean, I really love all the character moments in this episode. I love the performances. Every week we have to talk about Alison Pill because she's incredible. Just a beautiful, textured, multi-layered performance. If you watch The Ready Room, Frakes was talking about how great her performance is. And of course, Brent also is giving an amazing performance in this episode.
Yeah.
His portrayal of Adam Soong, and we can talk more about that character and his motivations as we get into our conversation. Really, really fascinating stuff. I just thought that that Allison's singing "Hello," that was so impressive and beautiful.
That was actually her singing, I guess.
That was her.
A dub. That
was her.
So she's at least a double threat. She can act and sing.
Right, exactly.
She did a little dancing too, I think.
I would not doubt she could dance. I wouldn't doubt it at all. So, and like I said, Annie Wershing, just amazing as the Borg Queen.
They just knock it out of the park consistently.
Yeah, beautiful.
I've never seen a character dynamic quite like this on Star Trek that I can remember. It's just so, as I said, creepy, engaging, fun at all the same time.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And not just a one-off. I mean, there may have been pairings in one episode or another, like, Mirror Spock and McCoy and Mirror Mirror, but just where they do this episode after episode and they keep it at that high level.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just really impressed.
I am too. And that's the impressive thing about this episode is the directing and the acting. Of course, this was, again, Jonathan Frakes directing, and he just did amazing work in this. He's used to this genre from his work on Leverage, and he's excellent at it. There's that montage sequence of Corey discovering the truth about her background,
Yeah.
And of course, the editing, the camera work is so great, and Isa Briones' performance is fantastic.
Yes, and the way that Brent Spiner plays Adam Soong a little differently in each of those videos, leading up to the one of Corey's immediate predecessor, where I think we're supposed to conclude by Soong talking about he lost his temper and got frustrated. I think he killed that one. I think that's the conclusion we're supposed to draw, which is pretty dark. But boy, Brent Spiner, I mean, you mentioned already how impressive he is as Adam Soong this week. And certainly, especially he didn't have as much screen time this week as last. But boy, that scene where he and Picard are face to face.
Yes.
Boy, that was electric because Patrick Stewart plays it exactly as he should, that he sees this face he knows so well, even though it looks a little different, it's Data's face, and but Brent Spiner doesn't know who Picard is. He only by name, right?
Right.
Right. Our mutual friend, Mr. Q. And of course, Brent Spiner delivers that line that should always make an audience take pause. I had no choice.
Yeah.
I remember listening to a podcast once about the reboot Battlestar Galactica, and the host said, anytime a character says "I had no choice," they always had a choice.
Yeah.
It's a sure dead giveaway that they're just. And of course, it's obvious. But it never hit me in quite that way. And so now every time in anything I watch, whenever I hear a character say, "I didn't have a choice," 9 times out of 10, of course they had other choices, but they're choosing this. And you said you want to talk about their motivations, so let's talk about this choice. I mean, it's so compelling to see Spiner play this character who is so driven, and again, not shading into cartoony bad guy territory, but
right,
but feels like this. It's not just love for Corey. I think there's that, but it's also, and maybe more so, his life's work is on the line. He's decided Corey's going to be the last for whatever reason. So if Corey doesn't survive, I think it's more maybe about his life's work than love. I think the love is there, but people are complicated. Their emotions and motivations are complicated in real life. So good fictional characters are that way too. So
yeah,
I think at this point it's more about Soong in his life work than about Corey.
I think you're absolutely right. Brent talked about this in the Ready Room, and he said she is a project to him, and that is where their relationship goes very, very wrong.
Yes,
he talks about Soong's feelings of worthlessness, but that at the same time his greatest love is himself. He calls him an absolute narcissist.
Yeah.
says he puts on the cloak of love, and that
Yeah.
she is his project. He loves his project, and he operates from selfishness, but his own needs come first.
And that's new information, right? Because last week we just knew that he was a genetic expert who had this daughter with an incurable genetic disease, and
Right.
you felt bad for. But now we have this, along with Corey, we learn the truth, and it does put everything in a different light.
Yeah. Well, and the idea that he is, creating her or trying to create her, over and over and over. And, watching some of that footage, the birthday scene and everything. And it seems very clear that he's doing these things for the camera, not so much really even for the project daughters, that he.
Yeah. It's not for the scrapbook, the family scrapbook. It's for a public.
Right. Well, it's for research, and it's for, funding or even really justification. I think, we go back to his conversation with the board, at the top of this story arc, where he's arguing for, hey, if there's any chance that I can push us forward, don't I have an obligation to try? I mean, very much defending himself against attack because he knows what he's doing is considered unethical, and there's good reason for it.
Yeah.
And I think we see the reason for that in this episode. But the idea that he does have those feelings of worthlessness if he can't succeed.
Right.
He is all of this stuff that he's putting on, that he's doing to try to, have this great legacy, is to make himself feel like he has some value.
Yeah.
And that's, Brent also had this hypothesis, the idea of the character that he had in his head as he went in, his own headcanon, because actors have their own headcanon about their own characters.
Of course.
A lot of times, was that he was abandoned as a baby. And then found and adopted by, he says, a Chinese family. That's how he gets the name Soong.
Okay.
And grows up, in that environment and feeling isolated, or feeling, I gather from what Brent says that maybe he feels like he has to prove his worth, or he has to prove that he has value somehow. And that's where all this comes from. So that's Brent's idea about it. But it does say something, doesn't it? I mean, about why we do the things we do. That examining our motivations is so important, because I think all good villains believe they're the good guy. Right.
That's
in
right.
fact, even in this episode,
yes,
Rio says, "Trust me, we're the good guys." Right.
And she says, "The good guys never say that,
Good guys never say that.
I like that. That was another line that you should always make an audience wonder.
Yes, and it does make us wonder, because we're not sure. In all honesty, our whole motivation in this story, everything that our characters are doing, we think we're doing the right thing to fix time. We don't know for absolute certain. We're just following the next clue and the next clue and the next clue. And gee, I hope we're not really the ones who are screwing history up. But examining our motives and understanding ourselves as honestly as we know how, as honestly as we can, is incredibly important, I think. Because our presuppositions and assumptions, the things that we just sort of have set up as the way we view things and the way things we assume are true before we even start thinking about stuff, those are the things that shape how we view our actions, how we view the world around us, how we view other people in our relationships to them. And if those are left unexamined, we have the ability as human beings to think ourselves into all kinds of crazy places we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So it's very, very important, I think, for us to continually have that self-examination, that honesty before ourselves, that honesty before God. And I think that's one thing about the idea that God knows us fully as we are, that if we understand that we have nothing to hide before God, and we can approach God as ourselves without any shielding up without any pretense. I think that also helps us encounter ourselves without pretense.
Yeah.
And without shields up. And we can maybe begin to examine ourselves in the light of how God sees us, so that we can better understand how to live into the best version of ourselves we can be.
Yes. Yeah, yes, no, I agree. If we can believe and trust that God sees us as we are and loves us as we are and wants to make us more than we are, then that's all to the good. It's the struggle. It's the struggle against, whatever voices you hear, whatever sources you want to say they're from that tell us otherwise. That it's often easier to believe the worst about ourselves, or maybe not even the worst, but to believe less than the best about ourselves.
Less than the best is enough.
Compliment. Yeah. Somebody pays us a compliment, we say, well, it wasn't that big a deal, or it wasn't that great, or always could better. So that's a kind of common everyday occurrence, but it's this example of, we have a tendency sometimes, some of us to some degree or other, to not believe the good things about ourselves that come to us from others, or that we can see about ourselves. We discredit them, and we'll often do it in the idea of, well, I don't want to get a big head, I don't want to think too much of myself, but okay, don't think too much of yourself, but think enough of yourself.
Yes.
But of course that's easier said than done. And
right.
I know, at least in my life, it's been a struggle sometimes. So,
Right. Well, it is, the truth is, it is okay and more than okay to be proud of yourself. You should be proud of the things that you've done that are worth doing. And you say, wait a minute. What about the sin of pride? Our English language, ways of talking about these ideas, and our oversimplified preacherly ways of talking about these ideas, are so problematic for us sometimes. And this is one of those places where there's pride and there's hubris.
Yes.
I think if biblical translations had used the word hubris or haughtiness more frequently, then we would get an idea of what it is that the scriptures call sinful.
Yeah.
I'm struck by the fact that what we see in this toxic relationship that Soong has with Kore and with himself, right, is rooted in the idea that he always has to make up for this sense of worthlessness, and that everything, his whole self, is riding on his ability to accomplish this thing. And it relates for me to something that Will said in the Ready Room when he's talking to Jonathan and Brent, and he says, he basically said, this is a crazy thing for me to admit publicly, and for me to admit to the two of you, but it is my truth. It is my reality. I just want you to be proud of me. And I think that desire for someone to be proud of us, and that desire to be proud of ourselves, to see that there is good that we've done well, and to then feel good about ourselves, that's a good thing. Yeah. That's something true about our human existence, that we need validation, and that we should be proud of the things that we do that are good. But that can become distorted in two ways. Either that we try to avoid that so much that we don't give ourselves enough credit for being who we are, and therefore put all of our worth into what we can accomplish, like Adam Soong.
Yeah.
Or we become so self-confident that we are proud of ourselves to the point that we only care about our own motivations and our own desires, and we put ourselves above everyone else, like the Borg Queen, who is so, right? So her confidence is a bit of a curative to some of Agnes's shortcomings, right? Some of Agnes's fear and trepidation and not trusting herself.
Right.
But if she gets too much of it, she's going to go way over the edge.
Yeah. That's fascinating that we've got both represented in those characters in this series. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we really have, but I think it's instructive for us to remember that these things aren't black and white. They aren't one thing or the other. It's not that all pride is bad. There is good pride and there is harmful pride, and learning the difference and knowing the difference it's like the warp engines. Scotty talks about the intermix ratio. Matter and antimatter. We got to have our matter and antimatter intermixed properly.
Right.
So that our engine will run correctly, and that's true of so much of our lives and so many of the things that we're doing. We are, the Christian narrative is too often about how sinful and how bad our humanity is, right? And what we do on this show and what Star Trek does, I think, so well is to talk about what's good in humanity. But we can't talk about what's good in humanity without talking about the bad, because we have to, in order to rescue that good, in order to live into that good, we have to balance it with the bad. Because we always know that's there. We always know our shortcomings are there. We always know our ability for haughtiness is there. And so we have to balance that with our understanding of humility, good humility, right? Not self-deprecation,
proper,
not
healthy
worthlessness.
Humility. Right.
Yeah. There's a difference. So it's all about balance. And I think that's what's going on in this whole story, with these characters, is about balance and imbalance. And how we're going to bring balance to the timeline. So fascinating stuff.
Well, speaking of balance and taking the good and the bad, a few minutes ago, it sounded like you had some as of yet unspoken reservations about this episode.
That is true. That was before we started recording, but that is true. We can talk about the things I didn't like about this episode.
I think we've heard it. I think the audience has heard it too. So I'd like to go into. I thought I heard a but coming at one point, but then
okay.
I probably blathered on and got us off track. No. So
no, you don't blather. I will tell you this. I did not like the script for this episode. I loved what it did for the characters, as we've talked about so far. But this whole Alias, Leverage, Ocean's 11 heist thing.
That didn't grow on you this week.
No, it was even worse this week.
How so?
Because it's badly written. Like, structurally, it doesn't work at all. Like, you have all these pieces in place, right, for this story to happen. But these people, the whole thing with the in-ear communicator thing that we've been using for however long. Maybe they're not using the in-ear thing. Yeah, they are. They touch their ears. So I don't know where they got those and why they're not. I guess they're not using their comm badges because everybody can hear those.
Right.
Or maybe it's an earpiece. Maybe it's a Bluetooth thing that attaches to their comm badge. I don't know. Doesn't matter. That whole thing has been used so much, and it's always this thing where people are 3 feet away from you and you're talking like the person you're talking to in your ear is in the room with you, and nobody looks at you like you're crazy, even if they've got you handcuffed to a couch and should be worried what you're doing. And then okay, so to get this thing going, all these security people are swarming and they're all coming after Picard, which is because Adam Soong is all of a sudden on the board, because he made this big donation. And so now everybody listens to what he says as of yesterday. And so he has all this power suddenly. And so he just whispers something to somebody, and in seconds, security is swarming Jean-Luc Picard. They don't have to ask why. It's just, he gave us a lot of money, so we do whatever he says, which doesn't make any sense. And then,
well, of course, that never happens in the real world.
I know, it makes sense to a degree, but at this level,
it made perfect sense to me.
At this level, though, it was so quickly.
We don't
know as far as we know,
we don't know. This isn't NASA, is it? We don't know who's really behind this.
No,
mission.
But I'm just saying,
and
he hasn't had time to develop relationships with anybody. He's had time.
He's got the money to do it for him.
But the ink on the check is barely dry. He just gave the donation. He had to have just given it because Q just set him up for this yesterday. And so he gave the donation and got into the event, and now all of a sudden everybody listens to what he says. I think it happens. I think it strains credibility. But all the security people are swarming Picard, and so then the Borg Queen does some nano electric magic, whatever, and turns the lights out. Okay, well, that causes confusion, but then Agnes starts singing, and all of a sudden there's power for some lights, and somebody knows that and magically turns on a spotlight, which just doesn't happen.
Well,
and then the
Borg
band
Queen again, right?
And the Borg Queen can't run a spotlight. You have to have a human being to direct that. Hey, I'm a theater kid. You have to have a human being to direct that
Hey,
thing.
I've done theater too, but if she's already established being able to turn out the lights.
She could turn it on, but that doesn't mean somebody's going to operate it. And all of a sudden it becomes a show, and she starts singing a song out of nowhere. The band starts kicking in like they've rehearsed it for a week, and they haven't. I mean, a good band can play along to a song they know, but who knows if this band knows the song, and they're just automatically
The song's 40-something years
and
old.
Then
Even
it's not 40 years. It's a Pat Benatar song, and then it's
1981.
Yeah, that's not 40. Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. All right, sorry. You said 40 years, and I thought
40 years.
You said 40 years, and I thought 1940s because it's a big band.
No, no,
I get it. But anyway, so then she does the song, and all of a sudden it's a show, and nobody cares, and because the lights went out, and now there's a show on, all the security people just stopped doing their jobs. They just aren't looking for Jean-Luc Picard anymore. I don't know where they are, or where they went to. Suddenly, Rios has an earpiece and a security badge that he can just stick on Jean-Luc. And so all of a sudden, nobody thinks he's suspicious anymore because he just looks like a security guy we've never seen before. And then we go and we get to the reason we're even here, which is having this conversation with Renée Picard, which could have been done as it was in one scene that didn't need all this 2 episodes of espionage setup to happen. And all the rest of this stuff is just window dressing. And then Adam Soong is, for some reason, sitting in his car waiting for them to come out the door when he doesn't even know they're planning to come out the door. And the only reason they go out the door is because Renée says, oh, it'll be faster if we go outside. We're in the same building in these 2 rooms, and it's going to be faster for us to get to where we're going if we go outside. Baloney. And then all of a sudden we get hit by a car that shouldn't have even been there. It's just the dumbest, worst writing structurally that I have seen in this series. I was roundly disappointed by how badly it was written. On that level, the character story and the drama and everything else, beautifully done, but it could have been done in a way that didn't have us go through all this hackneyed mess to have all these. And of course, Picard gets hit by the car. So where do we take him? We take him to the clinic that was just shut down like a day ago with the doctor who the last time it was raided. But the doctor who runs it, the last time we saw her, she was in ICE custody and didn't know when she was going to get out. The only reason Rios is here is because we hijacked a bus. How did she get out of custody, back home, and get her clinic back up and running in, what has it been, 18 hours? That's ridiculous. The whole thing is just this contrived mess structurally. Everything else is great, but structurally it's a contrived mess. And not to mention the orgy of evidence, as it's called in detective circles, that Corey stumbles upon on her dad's computer that I guess she's never sat down at before, and she can suddenly just click around at folders that he has easily available on his computer and find out the big secret he's been keeping from her whole life. I mean, come on. It did
occur to me that it was funny that she'd never thought to Google.
It's just a lot of overly simple, hugely contrived, way too convenient stuff happening all at once. And that's why this episode is only 40 minutes long, because it's filler. It really should have gotten us. We really should have pulled all this character stuff out in more interesting ways than this. That's my gripe.
Okay, well, I can't rebut all that. So, I mean, you're not wrong on some of that, but...
Of course I'm not.
You're confident and right.
I'm confident and right. You asked.
I mean,
sir.
yeah, your points are sound. I guess they didn't stick in my craw that way.
It just from a structural writing standpoint, I didn't like it. Everything else about the dialogue, the character interactions, I mean, all great. But
I think part of the problem is they've established that for whatever reason, Talon has never interfered or intervened directly.
She's
interfered, which the characters comment on too, and I was glad to see that addressed, because it is strange. Picard is asking her at the beginning of the episode, "You've been watching her from the sidelines for 24 years, and why is that?" And especially when 2 episodes ago, we established that she can like flip inside people's minds and give them milky eyes while she makes them do her bidding, which is
right.
something
weird.
Even Gary Seven didn't do.
Right.
And so I think, I mean, that is an odd choice that she's part of this, super alien race that is supposed to be nudging humanity in the right direction, but she's totally been hands off for 24 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And
see,
I
that's
guess
the question, though. I don't know if she's actually hands off. Is it that she hasn't interfered at all, or is it that she hasn't made her presence known? I think that's it, that she's not directly connecting with Renée, like talking to her, letting her know she's there. But that doesn't mean she's not. She says she's been protecting her. Well, clearly she's been doing something. She has interference of some kind, just like Gary Seven. They interfere. They make sure things go the way they're supposed to go, but they don't make their presence known. No contact, no communication, no evidence that they're there. I think that's the thing with her character. I don't think it's that she hasn't done anything and she's just been watching. She's the watcher, right?
No.
But I do think I do think she hasn't made her presence known.
If she were, I don't know. I mean, maybe you're right, but if she were more actively involved, she might have done something the first time Renée had an appointment with this therapist who's telling her, "Oh, you're right. You're not ready for this. You're not good enough to do that." And that's one thing I've wondered is how Q got into that position to begin with. Like, do other people see him differently? Maybe I don't know, but
I don't know. That's another thing that's just like, how is he conveniently a therapist? I don't know.
It seems to me the I don't have the lines in front of me, but the gist I took away from that scene of Picard and Talon was Picard's flabbergasted that she hasn't been doing more to protect this young woman. So I don't know. I'd have to go back and examine the evidence.
I think it's about direct involvement and direct encounter and direct, I think she's been operating indirectly and keeping herself secret. I think that's the thing, but I could be wrong too. So we'll see.
I mean, she knows a lot about Renée in terms of, she gets this way, but she's putting on a mask. She's not really doing all right. So she knows enough about Renée to accurately interpret Renée's mental states and all, but has she been doing anything indirectly to help her? It doesn't seem that way. I mean, again, last week we said Picard kind of had to light a fire under Talon to get this Ocean's 11 plan into motion, which I'll grant you, it's a little convoluted and all, but I guess I was just swept away by the sheer performance value of it.
Well, the performance value is fantastic. It's hard not to.
And I thought I did think the scene with Picard talking to Renée was beautiful. Beautiful. Not only did we get a nice big fat juicy Easter egg from the credits of Enterprise with that shuttle being given a name and significance in space exploration history. That was nice. But we had, Picard practically quoting the prologue to the Gospel of John. I found that even in the darkest circumstances, there's always a light. Sometimes only a glimmer, but trust it and do whatever you can to find your way home. I thought that was a beautiful moment. And I like the idea that the light shines in darkness and the darkness cannot overcome it isn't always a big floodlight or a big spotlight. Yes. Sometimes it is a glimmer. Sometimes it's, a candle flickering in the darkness, but it's still light. It's still something to look at in contrast to the darkness. And it still can give us direction in darkness. So I like that a lot. So I thought it was a beautiful scene. And it seems to have done the trick. I mean, I guess there seemed to be a line that was added maybe later. Like, we did successfully get her into quarantine. Like they had to reassure they reviewed the episode and realized they hadn't really tied that up with a bow. So, and I suppose Renée's presence on that mission could still be at stake somehow, but at least we know she's in quarantine now. But anyway,
well, it's a beautiful. That's the other piece of the episode that I really wanted to talk about, because again, that character dialogue is so good. That thematic stuff is so well written and so good. So it's like, it's good writing. that is in bad structure. But to me, bad structure that doesn't work for me. But that dialogue is so excellent. And I love that you brought it out. And that's such a true thing. You talk about that light being a glimmer.
Yeah.
That's such a true thing, particularly and especially in the dark night of the soul. Our ability when we are depressed, when we are overwhelmed, when we are anxious, our ability to believe the absolute worst about ourselves and our destiny and our future and our value and the world around us is profound.
Yes.
But, Jean-Luc points it out beautifully that he's like, fear just means that you are smart. There's a risk. And that's actually really true. That awareness, like I said, we have that push and pull and that balance that we have to strike. We have to be aware of the darkness in order to know, how to lean into the light, and what the light is there for. And that light is, like you said, a glimmer, or we might call it a still small voice, right? That the presence of God, as we would term that for sure, Jean-Luc wouldn't, but we would. The presence of God is sometimes such a small, unassuming thing,
right? And
comes in tiny packages that we wouldn't necessarily expect. And it seems weird that, she even calls it, Renée even calls this a pep talk, right?
Yeah.
And it seems weird that just a few words could change somebody's perspective and point of view so quickly. And on a certain level, it might be a little unrealistic that Renée could completely overcome all of her feelings of depression and unworthiness, right, in that moment. But all she has to do is overcome them enough to take the next step.
Yeah.
And that's all you have to do. If you've come to that dark place, all you have to do is take the next step. All you have to do is get through this one night. And sometimes those things that you've maybe heard a million times, maybe you don't even really believe that you are valuable, that there is going to be a tomorrow, that it's not all going to be darkness, that this isn't going to last forever. Maybe those ideas aren't things that you believe in those moments very easily or very well, but continuing to hear them, continuing to listen to them, just enough. The stereotypes, the idioms, whatever, hanging on to that stuff will help you get through, because that's where the light glimmers. The light glimmers in making a phone call and having somebody pick up on the other end. The light glimmers in listening to a piece of music, and search that out, because it is there. When you're in those dark places, it really is there. I say that having been in those dark places many times.
Right. No, I appreciate that. Yeah. And I guess maybe it could seem like unrealistic that Renée's good enough to take the next step after Jean-Luc's pep talk, but a few things. Nobody gives a pep talk like Jean-Luc Picard.
Bang on.
And secondly, we do, Renée's does have an advantage of she feels this connection to Picard that, of course, is timey-wimey stuff, to borrow from Doctor Who.
Right.
So I feel like I know you. So that's working for them as well. Mm-hmm. But also, don't underestimate the power of words. And I know you don't. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying you do. I'm saying we shouldn't. We should, right. Because our words do matter. And one of my favorite stories about this, I mentioned Frederick Buechner an episode or so ago on the show. He became a Christian because of a phrase that a preacher used in a sermon that when they went back later to look at the sermon manuscript wasn't even there. Apparently he just kind of said it off the cuff and didn't remember saying it, but it was that phrase that penetrated Buechner's heart so much that he gave his life to Christ right then and there. So, you never know, for good and for ill, what you say, how it will affect someone. And I've often thought, as someone who loves words and language and someone who preaches occasionally, and how risky and rash it may be of God to have entrusted the gospel to human language, especially when you compare with other religions. And this isn't comparing, one's better, one's worse, but the fact of the matter is, in Islam, God dictates the Quran. Mm-hmm. And in some traditions of Judaism, the whole Torah, the written and the oral Torah, is given to Moses all at once on Mount Sinai, right? Mm-hmm. But for Christians, as I understand the theology, God entrusts the gospel to us without dictating it, without overriding our ability to think and imagine and put language together. And, mm-hmm. So it's just, I guess my point is just, don't underestimate so if you, well, maybe this is the point. If you know of someone who you think could stand to hear a good word, don't let fear of saying the wrong thing hold you back. Your job is to say the best thing you know how, as God leads you to say it, and leave the rest to the Holy Spirit. So I think that's what Picard is doing. Even as you say, quite rightly, I don't think he'd frame it that way, but he's being an ambassador of the gospel in that moment to his great aunt.
Right. Absolutely. You're bang on. And that's very true. It's so important to go ahead and say those words that we know are true. How many people grow up never hearing from their parents that they're proud of them?
Right.
Right. How many people grow up never hearing from their family that they love them? Just saying I love you to somebody, even if you're saying good night, whatever it may be, it's worth the saying. It's worth the saying, because those words do have power. And I agree with you. I don't think it's unbelievable at all that Renée Picard got from Jean-Luc what she needed in that moment. Right.
Yeah.
I don't think she's never going to have struggles again because of it.
Oh, for sure.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I don't think she's never going to have struggles again because of it. But boy, I know that the right words at the right time can change a life. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's worth saying important things. It's worth saying true things to one another when we know they're important and when we know they're true, and when we know that they are loving things to say.
Right.
That build people up and not tear them down.
Yes, it's not licensed to say anything and everything.
That's
and
right.
to always say unfiltered things before you've thought a little bit about what effect this could have on someone. But
right.
Yeah.
Be ready with a word of encouragement far before you're ready with a word of critique.
Right.
Even though I just spent a good chunk of time critiquing this particular episode.
Hey, I think Jonathan Frakes and the company of Picard can take it.
I think they're
professionals. They understand art hits different people different ways. And I will say, I guess your point about the clinic is a good one, but I love the fact that we're not done with that story.
Yes, me too.
I was disappointed. I thought Dr. Teresa's story had come to an end, but I guess not. And I'm glad. And I think it's wonderful that Rios knows where people who need medical care and don't have ID can go, you know, firsthand now. And I think it's a beautiful, and I would never have seen it coming. And maybe that's just because I don't, think far enough ahead. I get caught up in the moment usually with episodes and stories. So I don't see so it was a delightful surprise to me that, they're going to take him to Teresa's clinic. So I was willing to forgive it, whatever structural implausibilities or contrivances might be there. This reminds me that, when we were reviewing Star Trek Discovery All In, we were on opposite sides.
Oh, that's right.
I was the one who had all these things about it. And you said, well, yeah, but it was such a great character episode.
Right. Well, and even that,
So there's balance even in this.
Yeah, I agree with you. We were on other different sides because that is a similar episode where we come up with an excuse to go have fun for an episode. But at the same time, I felt that episode was more credible in the way it got there than this one was. So that's for me. But it is interesting that we were on different sides of two similar episodes. It's a good observation.
And we're still friends.
And we're still friends. Well, I am encouraged, sir, that our friendship has survived these major differences over television episodes.
Yes.
But I do have to say one thing before we get out of this episode, that in the beginning, when Picard is talking with Talon, we've talked about the references to Star Trek episode titles in this season of Picard. Jean-Luc says to Talon, "Who is watching over you?"
Ah, yes.
Who watches the Watchers, right? So,
Well, and isn't it interesting that now we've got these two pairs of characters? We've got the Borg Queen inside Girardi's mind, and we're going to have Talon inside Picard's mind.
Fascinating.
One presumably for these selfish, world assimilating, nefarious ends, and the other hopefully to bring Picard back, so that the future can be saved and the world can be saved. So it's interesting, it's a line that Soong says to Corey in this episode. I think the why of things matters. He's saying this to justify what he's been doing. That's and right. Star Trek Discovery taught us that this season too, right? Why reasons matter. Rillick said to Burnham.
That's right.
So it just goes to show that these principles are true, but there's always more to it,
Yeah. Well, and it is interesting, the mirroring that you're talking about there between these two pairs of characters. One that is there for ill, and one that's there for good. One that's there for selfish purposes, and one that's ameliorative. And I find that interesting in the context of the title of the episode, 2 of 1. Which, of course, is a Borg reference, a reference to 7 of 9.
Right.
But also a reference to what's going on inside Agnes right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. That there are two forces pushing and pulling within one. And and that just seems to be a major theme in this episode, and perhaps a theme in this series. Certainly duality is something that Star Trek plays with a lot. There's even a book out there called the Star Trek's Double Vision.
Oh, really?
That's all about all these dualities that are in Star Trek.
That's interesting.
Oh, yeah, and so it's definitely something that's a very Star Trek theme, and it's very important for our lives. That is being explored in a way that we're just not used to in Star Trek. This is in many ways, the most un-Star Trek I think there's ever been. Picard is, and yet at the same time, it shows how the characters and the themes and the ideas that we talk about in Star Trek all the time, they work in any setting, and even if it's contrived.
When you say it's the most it may be the most un-Star Trek Star Trek has ever been.
Yeah.
Can you say a little more about that? Or
well, I mean that structurally. Again, I mean that in terms of the style and the genre of story we're telling, how far out of our normal environs we are. Now, I think there's un-Star Trek in where we tell stories in the Star Trek universe where we miss the heart of Star Trek. We fail on the philosophical side, which is the worst place you can fail. See, this episode structurally is a mess, in my opinion, but thematically hits it perfectly. And that's the main thing. That's what matters the most.
Yeah.
So when I say Picard is un-Star Trek, I mean in terms of aesthetics, and in terms of environs and character circumstances and all that sort of thing, we're in situations and we're in a place that we really haven't been, especially at such an extended point. I mean, if you look at the entirety of season 1 and even so far into season 2, there's very little that feels Star Trek-ish, in terms of how things go and where we go and what we do. And that's, but at the same time, we're drawing on elements of Star Trek, both in terms of characters and worlds, but also in terms of themes and ideas. And that's where I think Picard really succeeds, is showing that these themes and ideas translate to a lot of different contexts.
I guess I don't disagree with that fundamentally, although I'd push a little, because as you and Ruth talked about so well, a few weeks ago, this season of Picard feels so much like Star Trek 4.
Well, yeah, the Leah Thompson episodes did.
I mean, granted, Star Trek 4 is a kind of an un-Star Trek-ish Star Trek movie in the way you're talking about aesthetics and setting and circumstances, but getting the philosophy right. So, but I guess I think about even with heist type stories, we've seen some of those before.
Yeah, but
so there's precedence, but I don't really disagree with what you're saying, but I think it's maybe more nuanced than that.
We're outside Starfleet. We're outside Starfleet structures. We're not worrying about we're not under the Prime Directive. We don't have the uniforms. We don't have the ships. We spend a lot of time on the ground dealing with character stuff. Star Trek will do that now and again, within a story, but we're going to bookend it. We're going to go back to the ship, as often as possible and as quickly as possible. Even in Star Trek 4, we have this big, Star Trek story that's happening outside, and, about half the movie we spend in 1986.
Yeah.
For such an extended period, all the way through season 1 into season 2, most of Picard has steered clear of having us in a very recognizably Starfleet environment, very recognizably sci-fi environment even. And we're dealing with places and people and things that we just haven't seen in Star Trek before, and types of stories that we haven't seen in quite this way. So it's stretching the envelope, I think, of Star Trek, even while staying true to it in so many good ways. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I have enjoyed the getting into the meat of the episode and finding its value, even if it was at first I might have thought only a glimmer. It shone brightly than I even realized. But speaking of glimmers, let's see if there's a glimmer of gold in our future. In our answers to Star Trek trivia. Are you ready to submit your answers?
Ready when you are.
All right. 3, 2, 1. All right. What do we got?
So, number 1, what's B'Elanna Torres' destination in the Voyager episode Barge of the Dead? You said Stovokor. I said Stovokor, but I knew I was wrong when I wrote it. The answer is Grethor, the Klingon hell.
Oh, that's right.
She's on the barge for the Dishonored, and I knew that, but I couldn't think of what the destination was called. So
that's right. I completely forgot that aspect. I think of that episode with some frequency, and I completely forgot that aspect of it. Darn.
So for both of us on that one.
Yep.
Number 2. How does Captain Picard realize Data's memories may live on in B4 in Nemesis? You said B4 begins singing Blue Skies to by Irving Berlin to himself. I said B4 starts whistling Blue Skies. The answer is Picard hears B4 sing some of the lyrics to Blue Skies to himself. So you get that right, and I get that wrong.
Yeah, I guess so, because he does not whistle.
He does not whistle.
That is true.
Because even Data couldn't whistle.
That's
in
right.
the Counter of Farpoint. Did Data ever successly whistle?
Well, he whistled, but he couldn't hit that one note.
That one note in Pop Goes the Weasley couldn't get. But yeah, so you are at 1 and I'm at 0.
Oh my gosh.
And the third question is, what recurring part from Star Trek Enterprise was played by Prada, Breezy, and Wendy? Didn't know their names, but you said Porthos. I said Porthos the Beagle, and indeed, these 3 dogs all played Archer's dog, Porthos.
Nice.
So with 1 correct answer on my card and 2 correct answers on your card, you win the Golden Self-Sealing Stembolt this week.
Yay!
Congratulations!
Ding, 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 ding. Oh, thanks very much. You put up a good fight, sir. I mean, we were pretty well matched there. If it hadn't been for the whistling thing, we'd have been tied.
Well, and if you'd remembered Great Thor or I'd remembered Great Thor, that would have
changed things too.
But just don't get hubris about it.
That's right. I am proud but not haughty to receive this Golden Self-Sealing Stembolt.
You should be proud take pride in your accomplishment.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, Mike, this has been a fabulous episode. What have we got coming up next episode?
next episode, we're going to catch up on First Contact Day news and celebrate the release of the remastered director's edition of Star Trek The Motion Picture.
Yes, this is an episode we've wanted to do on the show for a long time, exploring Star Trek The Motion Picture, and the director's edition gives us the opportunity to do that. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch it before you listen to our episode.
Absolutely.
It's gonna be a great conversation. I'm looking forward to it. I hope all of you will join us for that as well. And in the meantime, please like, comment, and share. And if you like what you're hearing, please write a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. Your reviews help more people find out about the show and let us know how we're doing.
And send us your feedback. You can find us at Gospel Trek Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and The Gospel According to Star Trek on Facebook, or shoot us an email at gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to talk about your feedback on the show.
And you can now support the show by subscribing. You'll get early access to each week's topical episode, plus outtakes and bonus content. Just click the subscribe button wherever you listen. And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time,
I'm Mike Poteet.
And I'm Kevin C. Neese. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper. See you next time.